Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A small announcement before we begin with the Sheikh. December 31st, Saturday, between Maghrib, after Maghrib, inshallah, Guildford Musalla will be hosting a fundraiser for the Madrasa and Musalla. So please book your time and help this place. So again, December 31st, Saturday, after Maghrib, inshallah, dinner will be provided. Jazakallah khair for your cooperation and help for this place. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على خاتم النبيين حبيب رب العالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وعلى من تبعهم بإحسان ودعا بدعوتهم إلى يوم الدين وبعد. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يقربنا إليك يا رب العالمين. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من أن أضل أو أضل، أزل أو أزل، أظلم أو أظلم، أجهل أو أجهل علي. رب يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين يا فتاح. آمين. لا إله إلا الله. Respected ulama kiram, dear youth, brothers and sisters in Islam, our get together tonight, mashallah, is a very special occasion in the sense that we have gathered in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to learn, to discuss about a Prophet of Allah who holds a very special status in the teachings of our deen and in the teachings of Quran. It is very pleasing to see many children and youngsters and youth here, the future of the Ummah, inshallah al-Aziz, who will be a source of light and shine to the Islam and Muslim in this part of the world. Amin ya Rabbal Alameen. My dear youth and brothers and sisters, each year as the month of December begins, the center focus of the discussion in two communities is about Prophet Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Christians, when they talk about, they focus on two things on this topic. Number one, the birth of Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, and therefore they celebrate Christmas on 25th of December. But along with that, this is something that many of us perhaps don't know. They celebrate, anticipate, they call it Second Advent of Jesus, the second coming of Jesus, peace be upon him. Though in a completely different perspective, one of the things that we agree on and one of the things we disagree on with them. But the Christmas is in relation to both. It is not just the celebration of birth of Jesus according to Christian narrative, but also the second advent that they are expecting to happen sometime in the near future. For us, we use this as an opportunity to enlighten ourselves and improve our understanding of, as one of the scholars, he wrote a book and devoted the entire book to share the Muslim perspective of Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, and the title of the book is The Muslim Jesus. The Muslim Jesus. It's an interesting book to read, and perhaps this is the largest collection in English language from the Islamic perspective to explore the life account and the teachings and the stories of Prophet Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. My dear brothers and sisters, the life of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam stays in Quran as one of the very important, interesting, and unique stories of the Quran. One of the very important, interesting, and unique stories of the Quran. The reason being his life from the start to the end and beyond is filled with interesting facts and unique events. And because of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not once or twice or not a few times, if you count the references made to the life of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam in the Quran, they would come about 150 plus times. 150 plus times in more than 9 chapters of the Quran. Some of the Mufassirin, commenting on this frequent references of Quran referring to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, commented and remarked by saying that, number one, there is not such frequent reference that we find in Quran about any other prophet of Allah in such a vivid details as we find about Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, about his birth, about his mother's role, and also what she ate before and after, and the rest as the narrative continues. Not even about Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the one that Quran was revealed to. The reason being that this community of religion and Christianity at one time in history would hold on, and so to this day somehow it is true. And Muslim, one of the communities that they were constantly confronted with throughout history, you can look at the history of Islam and the interaction between Islam and Christianity, is one of the most frequent ones compared to any other religions that is out there. And it is this that oftentimes will cause threat and debate. And therefore there is such a frequent references in the Holy Quran to this Prophet of Allah, so that we better understand the whole narrative from the Quranic lens before we engage in any dialogue with the other group. Because they say in Arabic, فَاقِلُ الشَّيْءِ لَا يُعْطِيهِ. Someone who doesn't have something on his own, he cannot offer it to the other person. So therefore, the life account of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, like I said, is filled with many interesting and unique events which sets his story apart from all the other prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. And moreover, his life has a lot more relevance to us, to our time in this day and age. And I will give you some examples to be able to relate to this reality. First and foremost, Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, أَنَا أَوْلَى النَّاسِ بِعِيسَى ibn Maryam. أنا أولى الناس بعيسى ابن مريم وليس بيني وبينه نبي. And then the narration goes on to explain of his physical features and also of his second descent and his role, his messianic role on earth towards the end of time. But it began with this fact that no other prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could claim the closest proximity to Prophet as the Nabi Sallallahu rightfully did so. And the behind two prominent reasons. Number one, he said, there is not any prophet in between myself and him. Because the prophet that came after was none other than Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the second reason is being, it was only Isa alayhi salatu wa salam who foretold the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But there is a several indication in directly to the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that it is only us in this entire gigantic world population that is out there, 8 billion plus of different denominations, different religious backgrounds. It is only us who hold and preserve the true image and the status and the understanding of Prophet Isa alayhi salatu. Even the community that claims to follow him closely are the most deviant of all. So therefore, this is the several indication that we find in this hadith of Rasulullah. It is only us who, in between two extremes, strike this balance. In one hand, for example, Jews, the Yahud who denied and rejected him altogether. Right? On the other hand, Christians who, of course, held him in respect and esteem, however, they treated him as divine. Two extreme opposing ends. Right? And we in between the two. So this is one thing that is very special about Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And the other relevance that we have living in this part of the world, although it is predominantly a secular society that we are part of, right? However, if you look at the statistics, the census that is done, that they project and they explain that still 2/3 of Canadian population hold their religious view as Christians. Still nearly 2/3 of Canadian population. So it's a significant population, a percentage. So we are constantly going to interact with them. So it will help us to understand their perception about Isa alayhi salatu and how do we view him and see him and the commonalities and the differences between the two. So this is the relevance to us in this part of the world. And the third is, as we live in this era, we see the eschatological science, the ilm draws day by day closer to the end of time. Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned in his time, and he said, I have been sent along with the final hour as close as this. In this tick that you see the difference as a gap in between the Qiyamah and the birth of Rasul. And how many centuries have gone by since then? 15 centuries. Imagine how close are we then to the end. So studying the life of Isa alayhi salam will help us understand our not just theological aspect of our belief, but also his role, his messianic role when he is to return the world. And it is something that is required for this is only if you find in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Prophet sallallahu said he literally made this as part of our belief. He says sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that man shahida an la ilaha illallah, who declared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship and believe in the verse and the finality of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Not only that, in addition to that, believing in Isa alayhi salatu wasalam as Ruhullah, as Kalimatuhu, as the Messenger of Allah, then adkhalahu Allahu al-Jannah. So it is part and parcel of our belief to believe in Isa alayhi salatu wasalam as Ruhullah, as the Messenger of Allah. So because of these reasons, I said that there is a lot of relevance to us and to our time. And therefore, I'm going to summarize some unique aspects of the life of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, because time is at the essence. It's already 8:40 now. So we appreciate this Prophet of Allah and understand his position in Islam and his role to the community that he was sent to, and his role to the community and to the people when he will come back again. So the first thing that I want to start with, when we study Isa alayhi salatu wasalam from a Quranic point of view, we find the Quran focuses on four primary aspects of his life. Four primary aspects of his life. Number one, his miraculous birth and his infancy period, the childhood stage. Number two, his miracles. And number three, his interaction between himself and his community as the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the dialogue between himself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number four is the reiterated affirmation and confirmation and correction of the Christian belief, and affirming his humanity and servanthood, not attributing anything that is related to divine. So these are the four aspects that we find Quran. This is why it is grouped as divided into four aspects. So looking at the first one, Quran mentions in vivid details the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is the occasion, by the way, Christmas is the occasion, even Christian community discusses that. So therefore it would be of our benefit to understand the Quranic point of view to the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. So when we talk about the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, what we need to understand, number one, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times in the Quran mentions that he is the only one worthy of worship, and there is not any possibility of human being as a God incarnate. And the surah that all of us pretty much have memorized. All of us have pretty much memorized, and we often recite the surah in our prayer, the surah al-Ikhlas. Christianity has deviated. This is the first point where they have been off the track. And this is our serious difference between us and them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ikhlas, لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. Right? Neither does he beget anyone, nor is he begotten. It is impossible for God to be created. So when we attribute, when somebody attributes divinity to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, then they are running into the serious problem to justify the world before they exist, before the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. That means a world that runs without having a God to supervise it. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in Surah Al-Maryam in particular, and also in Surah Al-Imran, the details of the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And when we look at that, we find the passage after passage explaining this. But when we look at these ayat, I want to mention three things here. Number one, the Christian perspective of the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, and the Jewish understanding, and third is Muslim understanding. So Christians, when they look at the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, they believe, of course, in his virgin birth. They believe in his virgin birth. However, where they refer it as is this point where they say that Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was born to a virgin mother. However, that birth is seen as a God incarnate, God coming to the earth in a form and the flesh of human being. If you open the Gospel of Matthew, for example, I will quote from this gospel, and this is the reference that you will find for their belief that they hold. It is said in chapter 1 and verse number 23. It said that, behold, virgin woman, yani Mary, shall bear a child, she'll have a son, and that son will be called Emmanuel. What it will be called? Emmanuel. Emmanuel is a Hebrew word, and it means that God with us. God with us. So they said, this child that Virgin Mary will have will be called Emmanuel, God with us on earth. So this is the point of reference that they used. Whereas the Jewish understanding of the birth of Isa alayhi salam is, they believe in the birth of Isa alayhi salam. However, astaghfirullah, they accused Maryam alayhi salam of adultery. They accused her of fornication with a man by the name of Yusuf al-Najjar, Joseph the carpenter. He was a man known for his devout religiosity and spirituality. So this is what they fabricated and accused her of. And therefore, they used to call Isa alayhi salam as an illegitimate child, Ibn al-Baghdad, Ibn al-Zina. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very strong words, rejected this. This is the ayat. Muhtan Azim. This is a very brave type of muhtan that they directed to Maryam alayhi salam. So this is the Jewish understanding. Whereas we are concerned, and our view is concerned, of course, we see this as a special miracle. We see this as a special miracle that Isa alayhi salam was born to a virgin woman. However, this is not seen as God incarnate, rather as a special miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is with respect to the birth of Isa alayhi salam and Quran. When you turn to Quran, we find the ayat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that when Maryam alayhi salam, she was in a secluded place away from people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent an angel, and that was Jibreel alayhi salam, who gave her this good news that she will bear a child. Of course, to our women, and it would be for any woman, a news of surprise and shock. And therefore she said, how is it going to be possible for me, who never had, never married or never had any relationship with a man, to bear a child, to give birth to a child? And then what he said was this: Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do anything that he wishes, and he decides. And Allah wants to make this child ayatan linnas, an ayah, a sign of his omnipotence and his power and qudrat, to create human being in any way that he likes. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَرَحْمَةً مِنَّا وَكَانَ أَمْرًا مَقْضِيًّا. وَلَنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَرَحْمَةً مِنَّا وَكَانَ أَمْرًا مَقْضِيًّا. And this is something that has been decided. So this, and it is mentioned in some of the narrations, that when the sign of pregnancy started to appear on Maryam alayhi salam, so she, of course, started to appear as big. So this individual, Yusuf al-Najjar, was also a man who used to live in the temple worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he noticed that, and he commented to addressing her, remarked as follows: O Maryam, is it possible for a zar to be without a brother? Is it possible for the zar to be without the brother? What does it mean? Can you have a crop without the seed? And she said, yes, it is possible. And he asked how? Who created the seed first? It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it was Allah who created that without having to have any additional support for that. And then he asked, is it possible for a child to be without a father and without having a man and woman married to each other? And then she responded to him by saying how do you then explain the birth of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam? And this is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. Inna masala Isa inda Allahi kamasali Adam. Inna masala Isa inda Allahi kamasali Adam. خلقه من تراب ثم قال له كن فيكون. The likeness of the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam is no different than the likeness of the birth of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. So, and then when she responded to this to him, he remained silent. Yeah, so the place, this miraculous birth took place, according to the riwayat, was known as Bayt al-Lahm, Bethlehem. Today it is in the West Bank, in the South Jerusalem, side of the South Jerusalem. But back in those days, well, in a remote area, a little farther away from Palestine. So it was this became the place of birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And some of the unique aspects of the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam have been mentioned in the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, apart from being the miraculous birth. First and foremost, like I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Isa alayhi salatu wasalam without a father to demonstrate, to prove his unlimited qudrat and power of creation. To prove his unlimited qudrat and the power of creation. You know, the population, the human population as we see around, Allah has used 4 methods and means to create human beings. The first human being was created without a father and mother. That was Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. And second was Hawa alayhi salam. Allah created her without a mother. From Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. So there was one more example needed to complete this picture, and that's the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, to create a human being without father. The rest of the mankind is from man and woman. This is the general process of the birth. But these are the 4 different reasons Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used to demonstrate his qudrat. And this is what we also see in light of this narration. And when we look at the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because it was a very miraculous, but Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ma mawludi," there is not any child that was born except that the shaitan plagued the child, haunts the child. You know, we know that when the child comes to this world, generally comes crying. So this crying of the child, from the spiritual point of view, we understand it as shaitan poking and pricking the child. Why? Because it is to show his hostility toward another human being that has come to this world, another target that he found. So this is something that happens to pretty much every child that is born in the world. However, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, as well as his mother, Mary alayhi salam, both of them were protected against this because of the dua that the mother of Maryam alayhi salam made. There is a powerful lesson in this ayah for our women, for the mothers, that the dua that you make using these words, it is going to protect the children from the effects of shaitan, right through from the beginning to the end. And that is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, بسبب دعاء أعيدها بك وذريتها من الشيطان الرجيم. So this is the another aspect that we find with respect to the birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And when we look at the Quran, like I said, we are talking about the miraculous birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? So when she gave birth, it was something that I want to mention to our sisters who are listening to this. Perhaps it's going to be discussed in greater details, inshallah, when one of the scholars will talk about the family of Imran. But one important point that I want to draw to our attention, and it is something that women can relate to this better than anyone else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the pangs of the labor and the process of the birth and the period of pregnancy of Maryam alayhi salam in Quran. Right? But what is unique about this is that she was by herself, all alone. By herself, all alone. There was an out open in the desert. Just trying to understand the difficulty she must have gone through. This is why, what did she say? In the pit of these panties, in this situation, I wish I could have not lived to see this day. Today we have so much support around us for our sisters, and whether it's the family support, other support. And it is this that adds more nobility to the process and the maqam of Maryam. All this. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent exclusively an angel to comfort her. To comfort her and to console her and to give her this bushra that do not worry, Allah is with you. And therefore Allah provided her miraculously the food and water for her to sustain herself the whole time that she lived. So she gave birth on her own, the whole period she lived and spent on her own, and the subsequent period on her own. SubhanAllah. And all of this is mentioned in the Quran. And in light of that, we must appreciate the blessing that we got. So the major concern and worry that she had was what? Because there is something, like I said, for any chaste woman, any woman of nobility would be equally worried about. How am I going to face my community now? Because her mother had devoted her to serve the temple, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the goal of the mother of Maryam alayhi salam. All of a sudden, this something happened to her. She was shocked, but she was satisfied, of course, with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that she was worried that how am I going to face my people? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to protect your honor. Nothing. Your child will do that for you. Your child will do that for you. So lesson to our youngsters, to our children here, is not necessarily on that particular note, but what is our role and responsibility to protecting our parents, serving our parents, defending their dignity and honor. Right? Defending their dignity and honor. So when the time came, that she brought this child, holding the child in her arms to her community. And they all, not with a shock, they said to her, addressing her, that you have come up with something that is the most scandalous of all time. A woman that was known for nobility and piety, all of a sudden is seen with a child now. She was silent. She was silent. فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ. She just pointed to the child that she was holding. And then, subhanAllah, Isa alayhi salam spoke. As Isa alayhi salam spoke, he said, آتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا وجعلني مباركا أينما كنت وأوصاني بالصلاة والزكاة ما دمت حيا وبرا بوالدتي ولم يجعلني جبارا شقيا. So he began with قال إني عبد الله. قال إني عبد الله. The first thing that Isa alayhi salam said was, I am what? The son of Allah or the slave of Allah? Abdullah, the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He right there come up this word of allegation and accusation, because somebody who has been chosen by Allah to be the Nabi of Allah, to be the slave of Allah, the one who would receive revelation, etc. So it is not possible, it is not difficult for the person to come from this type of relationship that they are accusing her of. So this is what he said. قال إني عبد الله. And what did he say the next? آتاني الكتاب. My Rabb has given me the book. Ulama, they say, one of the unique aspects of the maqam of Isa alayhi salam in relation to the other prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially the previous ones, is that his mother was told before the birth of Isa alayhi salam of his prophetic role, that he will be playing the role. We find in Surah Al-Imran وإذ قالت الملائكة يا مريم إن الله يبشرك بكلمة منه اسمه المسيح عيسى بن مريم. So in that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this good news to Maryam alayhi salam and informs her that the child that you will bear and you will give birth to is going to be the prophet of Allah. It's going to be the sign of the omnipotence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Will be a source of mercy to mankind. وَرَحْمَةً مِنَّا. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also informed her of the miracles that he will be playing and performing in the dunya. So this is something very unique that she was told already ahead of time. And Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, with respect to him, so the other unique thing that we know about him, that he, as he was born, right, and then he was told that he will be receiving a book that is known as Injil. Because what did he say as a child in the cradle of the mother? Atani al-kitab. Although he did not receive the revelation yet, Mufassirin, they say the reason being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, narrated this tale in the past tense because it is as if it was already done. As if he already had it. Because to Allah, present and future is like same as past. Time is irrelevant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Time is irrelevant to Allah. So, Atani al-kitab, waja'alani nabiyya. All of this he was told at the age of infancy. And there is no other prophet of Allah that were told at that age. وَجَعَلَنِي مُبَارَكًا أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُ. He was the source of barakah wherever he would go. Because of the power of miracles that he was performing. And for the power of the message that he would be carrying along with him. And وَجَعَلَنِي مُبَارَكًا أَيْنَمَا وَأَوْصَانِي بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ مَا دُمْتُ حَيًّا. These two, the two commands that he said. Allah commanded me to pray, also commanded me to pay zakat. So he said, I have been sent with to establish prayer and to pay zakat in one way to fulfill the haqq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the other is to fulfill the dues to mankind. And then, وَلَمْ يَجْعَلْنِي جَبَّارًا شَقِيًّا. وَلَمْ يَجْعَلْنِي جَبَّارًا شَقِيًّا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make me jabbar, arrogant, ruthless, and tyrant. Rather, I am the source of mercy. And then the last thing when he said, he mentioned exclusively to be kind to my mother. To be kind to my mother. Why? Because he did not have a father. He did not have a father. So this is what we find concerning Isa alayhi salatu wasalam when he spoke in the cradle of the mother. Now, a few things to note here. The first and foremost thing that Rasulullah said, the speaking of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam in the cradle of the mother was a miracle undoubtedly. Without a doubt, it was a miracle. But what Rasulullah said, that there has been 3 kids, infants, that spoke while being in the cradle of the mother. And the first being Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, and the other 2 kids who spoke, to infant babies who spoke in the cradle of the mother. One was the child that was born to a woman who accused Jurayj, and committing adultery with her, because this was a man of piety and the man of spirituality who devoted his life to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this woman accused him that the child that I had is actually from him. So then, to defend his honor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed this child to speak. So he came straight to this child and he asked the child, say the name of your father. And the child, being in the cradle of the woman, he spoke out and said, my father is not you, rather so and so. To defend the honor of this man. This shows that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects those who are noble and pious individuals, their dignity and their honor. And there's another woman who was breastfeeding the child, and then he suddenly spoke out, and there's a long narration that I don't want to get into. But these are, in essence, these are the 3 only children, or rather infants, who spoke while being in the cradle. This miracle, what I want to mention here, is the first great miracle of Isa alayhi salam in the list of many that he performed. Because this he did directly. His birth in itself is a miracle, but the one that he performed was speaking at that stage. And this is seen as the first miracle of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. But one thing that I want to add to here, when we look at the biblical narrative, for example, the Christian perspective on this, first and foremost, we do not find this story being mentioned in the Bible anywhere at all. The Bible does not have it, period. It does not mention this miraculous speech of Isa at birth. They don't have it at all. But second important point, moreover than this, is that the first miracle that Isa performed according to Bible, according to John, and it is in the second or third chapter of John, that is one of the Gospels of the Bible. According to this Gospel, the first miracle Isa performed was at the age of 30. And what was that? Can you guess?
Walk on water.
Huh?
Walk on water.
Sorry?
Walk on water.
Walk on water. No. Yes. Turning water into wine. Turning water into wine. So Bible relates that the first miracle Jesus peace be upon him performed was anything other than this, and which is to turn water into wine. They say, and this is actually in the Bible too, the wine makes life merry. Wine makes life merry and source of joy. It's because they have legalized wine from a religious point of view, and therefore they justify using these fabricated words that they have incorporated in the Bible. So this is the first miracle that the Bible refers to as such. So this is with respect to the birth of Isa alayhi salam. Now, another great aspect that I want to briefly touch upon is the prophetic mission of Isa alayhi salam, that Quran refers to oftentimes. He was sent to Bani Israel. When we say Bani Israel, who are we referring to? The Jews. Right? The Jews of that time. The Jews of that time. And Quran is very clear about it. وَرَسُولًا إِلَىٰ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Maryam alayhi salam, even before she conceived him, that this child that you will give birth to, I'm going to make him the prophet to Bani Israel. And so some of the things about Isa alayhi salam that on this note is that Isa alayhi salam was in the list of many prophets that were sent to Bani Israel. He was the last of all. He was the last prophet to Bani Israel. There was no other prophet that came after him. But the one who came was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's message was to all people, to all mankind. Right? So this is something very different about Isa alayhi salam. Now, a footnote here. Christians, they claim, what do they claim? They make this claim that Christianity is a missionary religion. What does it mean? Missionary religion, it means that it is a religion to proselytize to all nations, to convert them to Christianity, and this is what they have been doing, right? And this is what we have done. But what is something interesting for us to know, it is also in the Gospel of Matthew, and this shows the contradiction that is there in the Bible. So they justify this approach, which means that Isa was sent to all people, not to the Israel. This is how it is seen as. Because Christians claim that he was sent to all people, therefore he commanded, this is in Matthew, that the disciples that he had towards the very end of his life, he commanded them, go to the nations and convert them and baptize them in the name of Father and Son. This is in Matthew. But what Quran says is what we believe in, right? But there is also a verse in Matthew that proves the Quranic ayah, and therefore there is a contradiction. One verse says that he was sent to the Jews, not the Gentile. This is in Matthew. What is the verse? The verse is that Isa alayhi said to his Hawariyyin, his disciples, do not go to Gentiles and do not enter the house of or the town of Samaritans. Rather go to the house of the lost sheep of Israelites. Lost sheep of Israel, which means the Israel. So this is the contradiction that we find in the Bible. So which of the two is correct? According to the Quran, Allah says, he was sent to Bani Israel, therefore we take this one that confirms the Quranic point of view. The other one that contradicts, we reject it because Quran doesn't say that. So this is with respect to the missionary role. And he was one of the very few prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His missionary role was for how long? This is something that in the Bible has, I think there are two contradicting narrations in the Bible. One says his missionary period was only for 1 year. The other says for 3 years. But in books of tafsir and the books written by the scholars, for example, the Qasas al-Anbiya by Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, it is narrated that he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who preached his community for a very short period of time. For how long? 3 years. He was one of the unique aspects of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, that he was appointed officially as the prophet of Allah at the age of 30. Generally speaking, the age for prophets to be nominated as prophets of Allah by Allah is at the age of 40. But Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was appointed officially as the prophet of Allah at the age of 30. And his role of prophethood lasted for 3 years, not more than that. And then he was taken to the heaven. So he, in this context, is a very short-lived prophet to play his role as a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something very unique about him. Now, when we think of Bani Israel, Bani Israel has been, historically speaking, very interesting nation. If you read Quran, if you read the historic accounts about them, first, number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favored this nation with so many great blessings. They were the only one who received food directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the heaven each day, and manna was salwa. This was the food coming to them directly each day, not having to worry about that, and just eat and enjoy. And Allah said, this nation was preferred over all the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them a very high status. No other nation prior to them, and even after them, had reached that level of maqam and honor. Just think about the word Allah used. Alameen. All the nations, they all are 1 degree below them. And not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Mulukan wa Anbiya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made many people among them as the prophets of Allah, as their kings. All of these were to their honor, to their maqam. However, what was their reaction in return to all of these favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Number one, they started to involve in different forms of shirk. Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, Quran says in Surah Al-Ma'idah that, when addressing Bani Israel, that do not worship anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ, whoever would associate anyone or anything as a partner to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden Jannah upon that person. وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ الْجَنَّةَ مَأْوَاهُ النَّارُ. So this is the greatest of all types of sin, to engage in shirk and engage in idol worship. And we find in the Quran, even in the time of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, what we find that when they had been, they call it the period of Exodus, period, the whole book in the Bible by the name of Exodus. And this book talks about their period in wandering away from Egypt and they had not yet entered the land of Palestine. So this period that they had in between, as they were passing by, after they were rescued from being drowned along with Fir'aun and his army, so they came upon a nation. And so they saw this nation, the group of people worshipping Asman. And what did they say right away to Musa alayhi salam? اجعل لنا آلهة كما لهم آلهة. Make for us also an idol like them so that we will worship an idol. So there are examples mentioned in the Quran that show they received so many blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but their return was completely the opposite of that. What was expected of them. They involved in shirk. Like when Musa alayhi salam had gone to meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and speak to Allah, so behind his back they got involved in shirk again, to worship the calf that was made out of gold, right? So this was one thing. The crime sheet of Bani Israel is very long, and apart from this, their spirituality was dead. They became corrupt, they became very materialistic, and they started to sell the religion in exchange of monetary gain. In exchange of monetary gain. And we find in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressing the ahbar, the religious leaders, saying, you were made in charge of preserving the message of Musa alayhi salam, Torah in other words. But what did they do in turn? They made something lawful as unlawful, unlawful as lawful, and selling the canonized to people in exchange of monetary gain. And the worst of all was this. They rejected the prophets of Allah and even had the audacity to kill a number of prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number of prophets of Allah. And Quran mentions this more than one places. إن الذين يكفرون بآيات الله ويقتلون النبيين بغير حق ويقتلون الذين يأمرون بالقسط. All of this. So they, in this regard, is one and only nation who had this audacity to kill number of prophets. According to one riwayah, they killed more than 300 prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many? More than 300. I mean, Zakaria alayhi salam was killed by them. Yahya alayhi salam was killed by them. And many that preceded them. About one of them is mentioned that he was hiding behind a tree, so they literally cut the tree into two pieces along with his body. Think of the brutality. So their heart was completely dead, and they had digressed to this degree. They had zero sympathy, zero spirituality left in their heart. So this was the nation that he was sent to. As he was sent to, it is not to our surprise, they tried to do the same to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam as well. But Isa, therefore, wherever he went, they chased him out of that. He was constantly on the move. One of the love that Isa alayhi salatu wasalam has is what? Al-Masih, right? Al-Masih. What does Masih mean? It's like anointed. But there is al-ard, kathiran, someone who frequently wanders and travels in the land. So this is why he was called as al-Masih, because of his frequent travel, because they would not allow him to settle in any place. He was constantly on the move. So they made his life and the life of his mother so miserable that they had to constantly move from one place to the other one, which is the case for some of the Muslim nations and Muslim communities today in the world. I do not want to mention the name. Right? And who is doing this? The recent community who has done this to the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? This is why once I was actually invited to a church we had mashallah Syrians, alhamdulillah, in our community. So one of the participants in the audience asked me this question. The Canadian government has brought huge influx of the refugees in our country, especially, he said, from Syria, there's the land of war and the land of the terror, and the people who are terrorists, This is what I said. So it reminded me of one of the quotes that I had read some time ago. So they said, these people who are here now in our country, they will do the same to our country too, to corrupt the country, etc. But I told him that these refugees, they are not the criminals. The true criminals are those who made them refugees. They are the ones who are the true criminals. These people, they have nothing to do with it. They were innocent people and the normal citizens trying to live their life. But those who made them refugees, they are the ones who are the true criminals. You go after them, not these ones who are being displaced. So, anyway, going back to the topic, so Isa alayhi was constantly moving from one place to the other one because of the situation that he was put in. He was trying to convince them, and he was trying to win their trust, win their heart by showing his kindness, by serving them. But they continued to reject him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them. Now I want to talk about the miracles, and then I will talk about 2 points and we'll end the show. So the mu'jizat that Isa alayhi was given, it was also something very unique. Quran mentions only 4 or 5 of them, but it does not mean that these were the only mu'jizat that he performed. From the time of his birth and all the way until his ascension and on his return. His life, ulama they say, is one of the very few prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whose life is filled with miracles. Filled with miracles. From the start to the halt to the end. What do I mean by halt? His ascension. And he's the only prophet of Allah who is still alive with his physical, with his physicality. Right? Where is he right now? Any student here? About the elders? Any youth in here, inshallah? Raise your hand. Isa alayhi salam at the moment, mashallah. There's one hand. Yes? The one in red t-shirt, you raise your hand? Yes? So let him say, yes? Isa alayhi salam, where is he at the moment? In the heavens. Sorry? The heaven. Which heaven? Oh. It says the second heaven. Second heaven. So he is in the second heaven. So, anyway, the discussion of the miracles of Isa alayhi salam is also very interesting. And Quran speaks of just a few of them, but the ahadith and other narrations shed extra light on that. What are the miracles that Quran speaks about? And why did only Quran highlight these ones? Because they are the most important of all other types. And no other prophet of Allah, by the way, was given a miracle of this magnitude as Isa alayhi was given. Right? One of the miracles was to raise dead back to life. Raise dead back to life. The other one? What's the other one? MashaAllah. To restore the vision of a blind who was born as blind. And also to heal the people who were suffering from leprosy. Right? And what is the other one? A very unique and interesting one.
Making birds of mud.
Sorry?
Making birds of mud.
MashaAllah. Fashioning bird out of clay and then blowing into the bird, then the bird will turn to be alive and then fly away. So he will do like this, blowing and then he will do like this and it will fly away. Literally. Like that. SubhanAllah. I mean, just hearing these miracles give us goosebumps. Imagine people witnessing these ones. Imagine people witnessing these ones, raising dead back to life. Yet these people, and the one who was sent to, they not only rejected, they got rather, as Rasulullah was done the same. It was treated the same manner, Sahir and Majnoon. They said, he's expert in sorcery, that's what they said. So this is the ultimate sign of the dead heart. To see a miracle of this magnitude with your own eye, but you have the audacity right there and then to reject it. That means this individual is 100%, but there is no more hope for him. There is no more hope for him afterwards. This is why ulama say, I'm going to tangent, that Ramadan is the month for the believers to have something different about their deen and about their ruhaniyat in the month of Ramadan. If that Muslim in the month of Ramadan is to remain the same as he is outside of Ramadan, that means his spirituality is 100% dead. There must be something different about him in Ramadan. Hasbunallah and al-Wakeel. So these are just a few miracles that the Quran talks about because they are very unique in nature. But scholars of Tafsir, commenting on this, they say, why was he given this kind of miracle? They explain, because each prophet of Allah, that he received the miracles, it is to match and meet and surpass the advancement of the time. Like Musa alayhi salam, because Egyptians, they had excelled in sorcery and magic. Therefore he was given that miracle where his asa, staff turned into a snake. Right? And with respect to Rasulullah, what is the greatest miracle of Rasulullah? Quran, right? And that is the only living miracle to this day and will continue to be the case till the day of judgment. But why so? This is seen as the greatest, the only living miracle of Rasulullah, because Arabs, they had pride in their oratory, in their poetry and language skills. This is why, what did they call the rest of the world? Ajam. Right? As if they are new, they don't know how to speak. So Quran was revealed as a crown, as a pinnacle to their excellence and expertise of the language, as a crown to that. And they were more challenging that, but they were so what in misleading. Not that when you produce a chapter like this, just a small surah like this, but it will be so what in misleading. And Allah said, the whole mankind and the jinn, if they are to come together, they will not. They will not be able to do so. They could not compete. So Isa alayhi was given miracle of this nature because in his time, what was something had reached its pinnacle of advancement? Medical science. Today there's a lot of notion, right, in the Western world and all over the world, the advancement in the medical field, and there is no doubt about it. But in his time, the medical advancement had reached to a level which is in many ways had surpassed all the previous history. Therefore, Allah gave him miracles that they could not compete with that. And even to this date, those miracles stand still as valid because, of course, they are gone. But in terms of the challenge, is there any doctor, any scientist who could raise dead back to life today? No, right? Even restoring the vision to a person who is born as blind, it is nearly impossible even to this date. So this is why Isa was given these miracles so that they could not find any excuse to reject them. Yet, like I said, their attitude was that they rejected. And Isa in addition to this, was given a kitab, Injil. And Injil, there are 4 or 5 points I want to make here for us to have a better understanding of Injil. Number one, the revelation that Isa received was at the age of 30 in the form of Injil. And Injil was a book that was given to him to endorse as a perfection of Torah, what is in Torah. Injil was not to abrogate any of the laws of Torah. But today, Christianity collectively has cancelled out all the laws of Torah. However, Injil, what we believe in, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he was given Torah and Injil both, so not to add something new to it, rather to renew that message to reform that message, and also to confirm that message. So it was a perfection of Quran. So this is the Islamic perspective. Now, when we look at the Christian view on Injil, number one, Christians they don't even believe in the revelation of Injil. Christians don't believe in that. Perhaps you don't know this, right? The Christians don't believe because in Hebrew, in one of the books of the Old Testament, it is there. This quotation is there. What is the quotation? Long ago, God spoke to our ancestors through many prophets. Long ago, God spoke to our ancestors through many prophets. But in these final days, He spoke to us through His own Son. So the coming of Messiah and the birth of Jesus in itself is a revelation, explanation of models that they believe in. This is the Christian understanding. Therefore, they don't believe in the angel, the Injil that we believe in. Then, what is their understanding of gospel then? What is their understanding of gospel if they don't believe in that? This is why their understanding of gospel is that it is a life account of Jesus, peace be upon him, and the teachings that was composed and penned down by 4 individuals who 2 of them were the disciples and 2 of them had not even meet and saw Isa alayhi salatu. What are the names of 4 gospels, by the way? Anyone? Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Right? So which is the first one and which is the last one? Mark is the first one.
Last one is John.
Last one is in. That's correct. So, but if you open today the New Testament, which gospel is the first one? No. Matthew is the first one. So many people mistakenly think Matthew is the first one, but it's not the first one. The first one is Mark. And interestingly, it is this individual who did not even meet Isa alayhi salatu, did not even see him. And the shortest gospel is Mark. And the gospel of Matthew is the one that has a lot of overlap of the teaching, the spiritual and moral teaching that we find in our tradition that is also there. They call it, the synoptical gospels. These 3, they share the same narrative, the passion narrative. Which are the 3 ones? Mark, Matthew, and Luke. The themes are common between them. But one gospel, which is very identically different, this gospel is called, as synoptical gospel. The other one is called canonical gospels. The 3 are called canonical gospel. And John is called synoptical gospel. This one is completely different. It is this Bible, it is this gospel that has created this whole agenda of seeing Isa alayhi salam as divine, as the Son of God, etc., etc. And that is the last of all, and this they claim that he was one of the Hawariyyin. So anyway, so their perception of these 4 gospels is that just nothing but the life account of Jesus, peace be upon him. And it was written after Jesus, peace be upon him. So they believe that it is not a revelation. Rather, inspired word. God inspired these individuals to compose these books. So when did these 4 gospels enter into the canonical gospel, historically speaking? It was to our surprise in 170 CE, in nearly 150 years after the ascension of Isa alayhi salam. For the first time in the history of Christianity, they were taken as the official gospel for Christianity. 150 years after. And by the person whose name was Irenaeus, who was the Bishop of France, Lyon. It was him who selected these 4 gospels and made them as the official gospels to Christianity. So this is just some information about these 4 gospels that we have. Now, the Quranic approach to this, as I mentioned, is this Injil was the one given to Isa alayhi salam. So, does the original Injil exist today? It does not exist. We believe that the original Injil was lost. The possible reason have been, number one, because it is interesting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentioned about Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, well, Surah 11 Israel, Allah said, وَيُعَلِّمُهُ الْكِتَابِ. One of the possible meaning of this kitab is that Allah taught him how to read and write. Allah taught him how to read and write. Yet, Isa alayhi salatu wasalam did not dictate his angel to his disciples, to his followers. And the reason, as the scholars say, possibly because of the onslaught against Christianity by Bani Israel. They were being persecuted. For the first time in the history of Christianity, the Christians came out as victorious or as a peaceful group was in the 3rd and 4th century. Until that time, they were always persecuted. When Constantine, the Roman emperor, accepted Christianity in the 3rd century and endorsed and officially approved Christianity to be the official religion of the state all over Europe. It was only then and there Christianity came out as triumphant. For the 400 years, Christianity lived under scrutiny. 400 years. Therefore, they did not have perhaps the opportunity to document, to preserve, despite living the cradle of civilization and having all the possible means to document that. You know, if you read the book by Michael H. Art, the 100 most influential figures, he says, and he puts Rasulullah as number 1 in that book, in the list of 100 most influential figures. He puts Prophet as number 1, and he justifies the reason. He says, my reason to read the list of the most 100 most influential figures by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was of course not Muslim. So he says because this individual was born in a land that was a barbaric land, far off from civilization. Whereas Jesus is concerned, he said, I myself being a Christian, I did not put him number 1 in this way because he was born in the center of civilization. Yet, he says the power of the teaching of this prophet, known as Muhammad, is such, has reached in a shortest period of time to the 4 corners of the world. And this is the only individual in the history of mankind, he said, who has been seen as supremely successful at all fronts, spiritual and also political, he says. So this is how it is defined. So Isa alayhi salam, despite being born in the cradle of civilization, he was not able to preserve his message because of the condition to which they were surrounded. So, therefore, we lost that. Now, our approach to these Gospels is of one of the two. And is saying, whatever Quran confirms, we accept. Whatever it contradicts with Quran, we reject. This is how it is seen. So wherever we find, I give you the example, right? The 2 verses. One says that Isa was sent to only the lost sheep of Israel. And the other one says to all nations. So which of the 2 will we take? The lost sheep of Israel. Why? Because that is in complete conformity with the Quranic message. Now in the end, my dear brothers and sisters, subhanAllah, what could be said? So this is how they continued to treat him, and then finally they came up with a case to run against Isa alayhi salatu Bani Israel. So they had 2 trials against him. Number 1 was, the first trial against him was in their own religious court in Palestine. So they tried to prove Isa alayhi salatu a man of apostasy, promoting ilhad, turning people away from their religion. So they tried him first in their own court, and because having the support of the community, they passed the judgment in their favor against him. Now, once they passed the judgment, what is the next step? Now the decision was based on the scripture of Israel. Anyone who would commit apostasy, what is the penalty for that individual? Is penalty of death. Penalty of death. So that because Roman Empire was the one ruling in those days this land, the land of Palestine. Although Roman Empire was a pagan empire, but they had the power extended all the way to here. So they had a deputy working on their behalf whose name was Pontius Pilate. So they raised this concern to him, saying, this man is causing unrest in the community and causing them to turn away from their religion, and is also against rebelling against the government. They made a list of accusations. So therefore, now we would like you to arrest this individual and crucify him. That's what they made a claim, and this is what the case that they made against him. And hence, to cut the long story short, a group of individuals, they went to the place where Isa was, in a house, along with his disciples. It was on Friday. It was on Friday in the evening. And so they surrounded the house of Isa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already had informed Isa, and which is mentioned in the Quran, وإذ قال الله يا عيسى إني متوفيك ورافعك إلي ومطهرك من الذين كفروا وجاعل الذين اتبعوك فوق الذين كفروا إلى يوم القيامة. It's clearly mentioned in the Quran. He already sensed the conspiracies taking place by them. So he gathered his disciples as he was there in فلما أحس عيسى أنه الكفر قال من أنصاري إلى الله. So he asked, who is going to devote his life to serve my mission after I'm gone? So the Hananiyin, who had truly accepted the message of Christianity, Isa the true version of Christianity, they devoted their life and they became his disciples. So they said, we are ready to do that. And then, as they surrounded his house, the house that he was in, he said, who amongst you, this is the one version, because Quran clearly says, وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ, the crucifixion did not take place, rather it appeared to them as such. It appeared to them as such. That's what Quran says. But there is no detail of the night in Quran or any authentic narration. So there are truly different interpretations to this incident and this event. So the one that I am sharing with you is in Tafsir Ibn Kathir. So Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that these individuals were surrounded, and as they surrounded the house, Isa asked his disciples, who amongst you is ready to take my appearance, for which he will be my companion in paradise? In exchange of that, he will be my companion in paradise. So a very young man who was present in that said, I am ready. So he was hoping someone other than him to respond to his call. But when 3 times he asked, all of them repeatedly said the same. So he said, let that be you. And for you, that you will be my companion in paradise. And as he said that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, caused him to sleep. And there was a hole in the roof, and then he was taken to the heaven with that. And as he was gone, as he ascended, the group walked inside the house of this individual who accepted the offer. He looked exactly the same as Isa alayhi salatu. So they took him, as it was the evening of Friday, so they took the place where they generally would crucify people. There were 2 other individuals, by the way. Isa alayhi salatu was not the only one. But there were the 2 other ones who had different crimes. So Isa alayhi salatu was one of those 3. So they took him, and they, according to the Christian narrative, they crucified him. So here again there are 4 different perceptions. One is the Christian one, that he was crucified, but 3 days later he was resurrected, and then he ascended to the heaven. And but our understanding is that he was ascended to the heaven. And there are a number of Christian denominations who actually believe what we believe in. The name of those ones, for example, Bessarians, they are the ones who believe in this one. So anyway, so this is how it happened. Qadianis, they believe in this narration of the crucifixion of Isa alayhi salatu with slight twist in that. Mullah Ahmad Qadiani said, Isa alayhi salatu was on the cross, he was crucified, but he did not fully die. He did not fully die. What happened then? His disciples, when they came to claim his body, so they found him still alive. So they treated him. As they treated him, now he became well, but he was in hiding. And then he quietly traveled Where did he travel to? According to his claim, he traveled to all the way to India, Kashmir. And then he lived an anonymous life in hiding where he died. And he says his qabr is also there. So this is the Qadiani version of this narrative, which is absolutely baseless and fabricated. But so this is how it happened. And like I said, this episode of his ascension is not to end his journey, rather it is to await his second coming. And Rasulullah said, that is going to be in my ummah. And as we are experiencing these times, it is the time that is a prelude to the second descent of Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. And I hope and pray that what we discussed in this 1 hour time to better or improve our understanding of Isa alayhi salatu wassalam and his mission and his teachings. One story that I want to end you with, and I think this is something very relevant to us, because 3 important lessons that I wanted to leave you with. Number 1, there are many Christians as we live in this society that they do not know the level of reverence and respect that Muslims have towards Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. Just today, I had a phone call, I think 2 hours ago, by a Christian man, and then he said, it was to my surprise that because in the month of December, generally they talk about Christians talk about Jesus, so I thought for a change, let me read the story of Jesus from a Quranic perspective, from Muslim narrative. It was to my surprise, I never knew that Quran has such a beautiful image of Jesus, far from the contradictions of Christianity, he says. So there are many Christians who do not know. So as a common denominator, we should share our narrative with them and make them understand our version of Jesus, peace be upon him. This is one important lesson. That's the goal that I wanted to share this story with you. And the second being, as we live in this era that is getting closer to the Qiyamah, it is very important that we also understand and learn about his descent. What is going to be his role? It is very important. It is part of our belief to believe in the second coming of Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. And also to know his messianic role that is going to play. And accordingly, understand our responsibility in that regard. And the third important message that I wanted to leave you with is the very lifestyle of Isa alayhi salatu wassalam was of absolute austerity, simplicity, and zuhud. Our tradition is rich with many, many beautiful stories of that. And I want to just share with you one story in which he summarizes the nature of the dunya and the temptation of the dunya. Once he was traveling, and one individual, this narration is mentioned in, for example, in Rasul al-Anbiya, and in Musnad al-Ahmad, in Ibn al-Dunya, and Kitab al-Zuhd wa-Qur'an. So, as he was traveling, one individual approached him. He said, "Can I join you and be your companion?" He said, "By all your means." So they started traveling. As they started traveling, they reached to a bank of a river. And Isa alayhi salatu wassalam opened up the food that he had, and there were 3 loaves of bread. 3 loaves of bread. So he ate one, and he offered the other one to the person who was with him as a companion, and there was one more. So after eating the one Isa alayhi salatu wassalam had, so he walked to the bank of the river to drink some water. And when he returned, he found that one loaf of bread that was there, extra one, went missing. So he asked this individual, what happened to the third loaf of bread? He said, "I don't know." So Isa alayhi salatu continued his journey. As he continued his journey, like I said, his life was full of miracles. So he saw a gazelle with 2 its young babies. So he called one of them to come. So one came. So he said, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he just did like this and took up the meat. And then he roasted. And then he did like this with musk, using the name of Allah, it healed and walked away. But the meat that he got from this side of the gazelle, he roasted and he ate part of it, and he offered the other one to the person who was with him. And now he asked him this, "In the name of the one who has shown you this great miracle, I ask you to tell me what happened to the third loaf of bread." he still denied, saying, I don't know. So they continued the journey. Now, there happened the miracle that this brother was referring to. So they came across a valley full of water. And one of the miracles of Isa alayhi is mentioned in Musnad Ahmad as well, that he used to walk on water as we walk on earth. So he held the hand of this individual, so they crossed this river walking on water. And then he asked the same question to this individual. That, I ask you in the name of the one who has shown you this miracle, what happened to the third loaf of bread? And he continued to deny it. But he's right, the nature. So now they reached to a desert land. Isa alayhi sat down and he started piling up the sand. And he made a huge pile of the sand. And then he said, be gold by the permission of Allah. So this huge heap of sand turned into gold. So he divided that into 3 portions. Now this is interesting. He said, one for me, one for you, and one for the one who ate the third loaf of bread. One for the one who ate the third loaf of bread. This man, looking at this gold, he said, oh, it was me who ate that. It was me who ate that one. Isa alayhi looked at him, and then he said, no, you take all of this. I'm not interested. So he walked away. As he walked away, now this story becomes interesting. So this man sitting all alone with this huge heap of gold, 2 individuals came looking at this. So they wanted to take the gold from him and to kill him. He said, look, we can share this among ourselves. We don't need to kill anyone. So they agreed. As they decided to share this gold into 3 portions, one for each. So they said, let's have a party type. We'll eat together and then we will take the respective share and walk away. So they said, let's send one person to the city to get the food. So they chose one and they sent this individual. So this individual who went to the city to get the food, he thought to himself, this is a huge piece of gold, a huge amount of gold. I don't want to share with anyone. Let me poison the food. Let me poison the food so that I kill them and I will take this all to myself. And those 2 remaining behind, they also plotted against him. They said, why should we share this with 3 people? Just 2 of us can have it. So let's share this, let's divide it into 2. When he comes, we will kill him, and then we will have this between 2 of us. So when he came back, they killed him. And after they killed him, they ate the food. And all 3 were dead. Isa alayhi after some time, as he was walking by the same place with his disciples, he saw this whole, this huge heap of gold and these 3 dead bodies lying next to it. So he addressed his disciples saying, this is the nature of dunya. This is the nature of dunya. فَاحْذَرُوهُ. Be aware of that. Be aware of that. My dear brothers and sisters, we live in this age in this very profane world that thrives on commercialism, that thrives on consumerism, that thrives on materialism, that thrives on secularism. All of these are nothing but a detrimental tool to your soul. Nothing but the demise to your soul. Look at the community in the name of this very individual who has renounced the possession of the dunya and the belongings of the dunya. They have turned his birthday into the source of celebration, not the celebration, rather commercialism. Therefore, there is nothing remaining in today's celebration of Christmas, anything that has to do with religion at all. It's all about commercialism. In the name of the very person who renounced the entire position of the dunya. So Rasulullah said, يحرق الله من الفقر ويخشى عليكم ولكن أخشى عليكم أن تبسط عليكم الدنيا كما بسط على من كان قبلكم. I do not fear poverty for you. I took the share of the poverty of my ummah on myself. What does National say? But for you, what I fear is this rat race of materialism that you are al-hakim of the kafir hatta zuhtum al-muqabil. And I'm sorry to say this is the reality. I address myself first and foremost. 90% of Muslims who have come to this part of the world, they have come here nothing but other than for the reason of dunya. Just dunya, materialism, that's it. Change your intention. Change your intention. Be the ambassador of Islam in this part of the world. And if you do that, you are living here will be better than even living in Makkah and Mukarramah and Madinah Munawwarah, because you are the ambassadors of Islam and Muslim in this land of kufr. And these are not my words. These are the words of the Mashayikh. Otherwise, there is no guarantee that you alone will live as Muslim, but there is no guarantee that your children will remain as Muslims in this part of the world. And take these words seriously. We hope and pray that these words would rejuvenate our iman and inspire our hearts and ourselves to be a better Muslim in this inshallah world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive our shortcomings, and my apologies for taking so much of your time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive one and all. May He guide us all to the path of piety. آمين رب العالمين. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
جزاك الله خيرا.